So I wanted to talk about pourovers today. I found it's a good way of getting into coffee that's fairly easy and simple, or it can be complicated if you want it to be. But it's a good way of getting into quality coffee without spending a lot of money. Um, and it's less finicky than brewing espresso. I found when I had my, and you don't need three kettles. um, I found when I had my ECM Synchronica, I think because um, maybe because I spent all the money on that machine, I just felt like it would be, and it's such a big, heavy duty espresso machine. I felt like I needed to make espresso every day. So like now with the Breville dual boiler that I got cheap used, it's an older one. Although it's not that cheap new, but it's a good value still. Um, with that one, it's like, yeah, I can do pour over if I think the coffee's going to be better with pour over, or I could use my espresso machine. So, yeah, I'm more open to doing different brew methods and enjoying coffee in different ways and not feeling obligated to use my espresso machine and give it, 3, 4 shots a day, because otherwise you feel like you're wasting its potential. So I usually do two 12-gram pour overs. This one fell asleep. Yep. The thing I like about the Lunar, this is the, not the Lunar, this one's the Lunar. This one's the Heroya Jimmy scale, and the thing I like about that is it doesn't go to sleep totally. Like the display will turn off if you don't touch it. But let's say you had the timer running. It also has a dedicated timer button, so like 1, 2, 3 buttons as opposed to 1, 2 buttons on the Lunar, which makes it easier to change modes and do things. So with this one, all you gotta do is one tap to change modes. On this one, you gotta tap and hold. This is espresso mode, tap and hold, pour over mode. And if you had all 7 modes, then you're gonna have to tap and hold a bunch of times to get through them, but you can disable the ones you don't need. Same thing on that. So yeah, I could show you my recipe. So right now I'm doing 200 Fahrenheit brew water. Actually, you know what? This is a geisha coffee, and I'm gonna bump it up to 202. So here's what I'm using. So I found for fancier, lighter roasted coffees, I've been enjoying them more as a pour over. First of all, you extract from 12 grams, actually, I guess I'm doing double, so from 24 grams, you get a lot more coffee out of it than, 2 shots of 16 or 18 gram espresso, where you get 30 gram, 36 gram, 40 gram shots. I'm getting like 200 milliliter, maybe like 180 milliliter drinks, because a lot of the water gets left in, absorbed by the coffee. So you get a lot more coffee, a lot more sipping, a lot more enjoying, even though it's not as strong and intense. It's just nice to have a nice light kind of pour over. So I find for like geishas, for like fancy light roasted coffee, I find I've been liking the pour overs more because it's easier to get good results with that brew method. You can do it well for espresso. I enjoyed light roasted espresso shots, but it's trickier. They don't look pretty. Looks don't really matter, but yeah. Uh, yeah, it's just less consistent. So like sometimes you'll get a good shot, sometimes you'll get a bad shot, and you waste 16, 18 grams, whatever, each shot if you don't get it right. Where pour over, I've had one pour over that was like bitter and over extracted. Well, maybe a couple because I was experimenting with different water types. That's another rabbit hole to get into. But right now I'm just using Brita filtered tap water and it works really well. with relatively hard tap water here in Toronto. Yeah, so today I just used this. I got this like super cheap. This is the Timor C2, and I find it does really well for pourovers. I don't think it can do espresso, or it says it can, but it's like really slow to grind. It doesn't seem like it's feeding into the burrs properly. So the one downside, not that you want to grind for espresso, especially with light roast on something like that, a little hand grinder, it will be a lot of effort. Um, I also got the ZP6, which is a more expensive hand grinder, and I think the quality of the C2 for like a fraction of the price is just as good. Like some cups I've had that were better out of this, some cups I've had were better out of the ZP6. They're slightly different, but they're both good, high clarity, kind of just make good, tasty coffee. Same with the Ode. This is a version 1 Ode with SSP multi-purpose burrs, which do really well for pourovers. I also like them for espresso, for light roast, medium, anything that's good quality roast, because the problem with the SSP multi-purpose burrs is it will show you everything that's in your coffee. So like if it's not a good coffee, if it's over roasted, if it's just old coffee or bad coffee, you'll notice the defects in it more. Where I've had like coffees that were not quite as good and they turned out tastier. They turned out tastier. Shush, doggy. So here's a good example. So it looks like it's off, but nope. Oh, so now it started timing because it's on pour over mode and it thought I started pouring. So that would be good. If it wasn't ready, like even with the display off, if I started pouring, it would start counting um, as it's supposed to. Yeah, so the ZP6, the conical burrs are generally a little more forgiving, although I don't find them to be like lacking clarity versus the Ode with SSP multi-purpose burrs, which are really high clarity. So like I don't feel like I'm missing out on clarity, where like with some grinders, um, maybe more for espresso too, it was like sometimes you feel like it's just too blended and you're missing out on the flavors of the coffee. Um, but I don't get that with this C2, or I haven't noticed it, and the ZP6. Like it just gives a good balance of like flavor clarity and just tasty, um, just easy to make tasty coffee with them. Um, yeah, and this one's pretty affordable. CP6, nicer to use, for sure. This one's a little more effort, but still, it's not that much effort for grinding even a light roast, because you're grinding coarser for pour over. So not that hard, not that slow. It's manageable. Um, yeah, I just don't like the handle's a little shorter. It feels like they just made it shorter, probably versus their higher end models, just so that it has you have more features on the newer or higher end model of this brand. So it seems like they just nerfed the handle, made it shorter, just so that it's a nicer feature on their higher end models. Also, the inside of the catch cup is a little rougher. I don't like that because I like to rub out all the fines and chaff and clean it out in between brews. The ZP6 is nice and smooth internally, easy to wipe out. But not a deal breaker because the quality and the price is good. So yeah, I'll show you my recipe. So I do 12 grams. Whoops, I don't want to show you that. So this is going to be a little more of an experimental brew. So usually I would do like 1 to 16 ratio. So I'd do like 190 grams of water or milliliters. Temperature is not accurate on this. I'm actually doing a little hotter on 202. But by the time you pour it, I think the downside about these kind of kettles with the gooseneck is you lose some temperature as you're pouring it. So it's probably going to be more like 198 or something like that. So Normally for pour overs, you do a bloom where you pour like a small amount just to pre-wet and let the coffee kind of off gas. Because when it's fresh roasted, you get CO2 that wants to escape, and the initial pour is going to be not extracting if you just make a big pour for the first pour. So this is a series of smaller pours, which might be a little more tricky than doing a few larger pours, because what happens with more pours is you somehow the fines agitate, or they get agitated from the water and they end up clogging the filter, so you might end up with some stalling at the end where the water doesn't want to flow down. So we'll see if that happens. But basically, so this one I'm doing double bloom. So I'm going to do bloom with hot water, and then because I have two kettles, I'm going to do one with cooler water. I did heat up the kettle earlier, so it's not like cold, but now it's probably lost a lot of temperature because it's been a while. I've been talking, doing the video. So we're going to do 30 with the hot water, wait 30 seconds. That's a typical thing for a bloom. You might want to wait a minute. But because I'm doing two blooms, we're going to do a cold bloom for the second bloom after 30 seconds. Then we're going to wait another 30 seconds. And then the rest of the pours, I just did the first pour as 40 grams because I'm doing 30 and 30, and that will get you up to a nice even 100. So it's easier for me to remember. And then 50 and 50, so you get up to 200. Make sense? 3, 6. And then 40 gets you up to 100, and then 200. And because the scale will just stop counting, I put another pause at the end so that we can get a total brew time and the timer doesn't stop. That's one downside of using this scale with their app. So you just got to remember to put in extra time at the end, otherwise it will stop counting, and then you won't know if it drained at like 3 minutes or 4 minutes or whatever, unless you're paying attention to another timer. Okay, so I'm turned off again. Where's the power button? Okay. So I think this, it says 144, but when I hit start, it's going to reset. Start brew. All right, so for V60, which is what this is, I really enjoyed the V60. Haven't used this one in a while. This is the Timor B75. This one gives you more tea-like sweet results with less brightness, but we're going to compare with the V60 today because I haven't used it in a while. And I don't think I've ever compared it with the V60 because I was using the Timor Crystal Eye brewer before. So anyway, here's what we're going to do. See if we can get this all in the shot. Oops. Okay, so I think you want to actually have it pouring smooth, which I did not do that well. So I'm going to give this one, yeah, it drained fast. It's going down. So basically you just want to get it wet. I would shake it. So stagger the time a little bit because I'm doing two at once. That can get confusing with the timing. So there we go, we got 31, okay, a little different, but okay, so it's already been 30 seconds. I'm ready for my second pour, which is actually with second kettle. Okay, so another 30 grams. So I'm just gonna make sure everything's wet to 60. Not doing a very good job today. So I'm gonna do the same thing with this one. It's been sitting for over 30 seconds. So now we did a hot bloom and a cold bloom, and kettle is back on the base, which keeps it up to its hotter temperature. With the geisha, it's kind of a light, it's harder to extract, so more pores seem to extract more. This one's 40 grams. We're going to do the same thing here. So we're going to go up to about 100. And I was pouring mostly in the center, which now with this one, I think you want to circle around a bit. Whoops, I went over. Okay, I'm ready for another pour on this one. Do two at once. So this one you want to mostly stay in the center because that's where most of the coffee is, due to the V shape, the conical. And this one I think I have to move around a little more just to make sure everything's wet. So we're at 150. I'm going to match, yep, just matching the other one since this is ready for a pour already. Last pour to about 200. Do want to pour nice and gentle. All right, so we got our brews. Turn off my kettle. I'm done. So, like I was saying, like it hasn't drained yet. So a lot of people like to keep track of their total time until it drains. So that's why I gave it like an extra minute and a half or something on the timer. So it's going to count down. It should definitely be done by then. Sometimes people will agitate, give it a shake. I don't know if that's going to help or make it worse. I think that might increase the chances of stalling if you do agitation. It's a little stalled. There's like some water in there. It's hard to see in this lighting on both of them. So that one's at 4 minutes, that one's at 340. So it's about drained at 4 minutes, which is okay. Ideally, I think most people say to go, you want it to drain a little faster, more like 3 minutes, but 4 minutes is acceptable, and some people say timing doesn't matter. I've had good results with 4-minute brews, so I think it should be fine. That one's also done at around 4 minutes, so about the same drain time. Typically, they say the B75 brewer brews faster because it's got a huge big opening on the bottom. The papers do make a difference, but I found, yeah, even with, depends on the coffee too. Some coffees have more fines. Ethiopians tend to have more fines. So timer is done, and then it keeps a record of if I want to look back at how I poured. Yeah, and you can customize, like I've set this recipe and customized it myself. You can make it say whatever you want. You can do like, if I didn't have such a hard extracting coffee, like it's a really dense coffee that needs more pours and more, so I upped the temperature a little, and that's why I'm doing a 5-pour recipe, because it gets more coffee out of the coffee versus a 3-pour. So normally what I do is one, my other recipe I sometimes do, I would do 1 blooming pour, and then I would do 2 medium sized, like 80 gram, around 80 gram other pours. So those would be my main pours, and it would end up being around the same amount in total, but only 3 pours, and you'll get a less strong extraction. So if you feel like it's too weak, then you can change your recipe to add more pours or increase the temperature, or you can increase your, make your grind size finer if your flowing is, your timing is good. Because let's say it took 5 minutes to drain, that means you're probably grinding too fine, or your coffee is just, your grinder might have too many fines, and that could be a problem. But yeah, you can usually tell by the coffee bed if your grinder is giving you lots of fines. If you see like mostly I see the fines sticking to the side here, which isn't a lot. You want to watch out if your bed looks muddy, if there's like a silky mud layer up top. What you're seeing here is like some chaff that settles on the top. That's fine. And then these are the fines, which is pretty low for a not expensive grinder. So I'm impressed, and it gets good results. So yeah, if you want to know, let's taste it. The other thing I like to do is after you pull your cup, put it on another cup so that, like, sometimes I get some extra drips out. So I just stack them, and yeah, and you can taste the coffee that drips out and see if there's, if it's bitter, if it's tasting like it's over extracted, then you got as much out of your coffee as, or maybe more than you needed to. But if it tastes good still and it's kind of, the extra drips aren't bad, then you probably could have poured more and got more out of your coffee. So that's like something you can learn for the next brew you make.